Okay, Farah, you're live now.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, esteemed members of the DOE, notably Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, Executive Director Christina Melendez, Senior Director Jesse Mojica, Executive Assistant to the Deputy Chancellor Angelica Jackson for making tonight possible. Welcome to all of our parents and education stakeholders who are here with us tonight. A big thank you to our leadership team and the entire team at NYC SEFT for always working tirelessly to make it happen. And tonight, a great shout out to Chaplain Sandra Mitchell, who was supposed to be present with us tonight, but will not be able to because of a health emergency. Sandra, this roundtable is for you. Thank you for all your help. Lots of love and a quick recovery to you. Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, thank you for accepting our invitation to discuss parent partnership as we at the New York City Coalition for Educating Families Together believe it should be. At New York City SEFT, we believe in parent partnership, not in parent engagement. We are hopeful that the Adams administration, the New York City Public Schools under the leadership of Chancellor Banks and the Department of Family and Community Engagement and External Affairs under your leadership will reimagine the way the New York City Public Schools and parents interface. In the current state of things, our major grievances include the dismissal of our voices in what regards the safety and the lives of our children and our entire families in the middle of a pandemic, which has resulted in the erosion of school norms as it pertains to violence and discipline, not to mention the inconsistencies in academic rigor and positive school culture. The lack of transparency, the lack of dialogue, the lack of access, the lack of understanding, the lack of compassion for the fears of suffering families, and the complete disregard for the humanity of parents and students have left a bitter taste in the mouths of parents. Parents just know that they can never experience this kind of helplessness again. Parents are not willing to ever be relegated to just being spectators in the education and the lives of their children ever again. That era, according to us parents, is over. Fitting to quote tonight the Ukrainian-born Israeli Hebrew poet Yitzhak Limdan, given everything that is happening in the world today. In his Hebrew epic poem called Masada, a historical epic, he stated, "Never again shall Masada fall," and never again became the cry of the Jewish people at the end of the Holocaust. And it has since then become the universal cry of empowered peoples throughout the world who are seeking to make right the injustices done to them by those who are more powerful. When Chancellor Banks visited CEC 8, we asked him to see parents and not make parents invisible, and we quoted from The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Tonight, DC Lloyd, we are asking you to go beyond seeing parents. We are asking you to think about and to implement ways to make parents full New York City public school partners so that never again will they be dismissed by the educational system on any level because parents want to be full partners in everything that concerns the education of their children. And so with that, Deputy Chancellor, we will give you your chance for an opening statement.
Thank you so much, Farah. It is a pleasure to be here with everyone this evening. And thank you for that introduction and also for sharing the grievances of parents. So I'm going to start with just by saying, I appreciate this opportunity to join tonight's roundtable discussion and to hear from you and to to learn from you how we change and improve how we launch family engagement around at the Department of Education. As many of you have heard, Chancellor Banks is committed to engaging parents in policy decisions that matter most. I think you've heard him say that. He says it repeatedly. He is deeply committed to our family engagement. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Division of Family, Community Engagement and External Affairs since I've joined, along with Dr. Melendez and other leaders around this division. The division incorporates family community engagement, which you know and are probably most familiar with, and also translations and interpretations, marketing, communications, press, and intergovernmental affairs. Each of these teams is led by an executive director. FACE, as you know, is led by Dr. Christina Melendez, and that executive director implements the broad strategic vision of the chancellor. On the day-to-day basis, we communicate critical information to families translated into the 10 languages. We develop the marketing materials that raise awareness about our schools, programs, resources, and supports. And we cultivate relationships with city and state elected officials to ensure that we have the widest perspective on what is going on in our school districts. Together, this division leads our relationship building and communication from DOE central offices to families and communities and to the state. What's unique about this chancellor is the increased focus on engaging families in policy-making decisions. I've been on many town halls with many of you that are here tonight, some of who I see, some of who I probably can't see at this moment. And I think you have seen for yourself how committed he is to being in dialogue in order to deeply understand those issues that are being raised from prior administrations, issues that are on the table now, and issues that continue to be of concern. What I'm charged with is restoring and expanding capacity across this division so that we elevate the priorities and increase the resources, ensure that we have the capacity in order to engage and empower parents across this entire city. And as part of that, we are going to be developing a multimodal engagement strategy that is based in dialogue, but also increases data collection so that improves our understanding about what those priorities are, how you feel about decisions we're making, but also takes a pulse on policy decisions that are happening around DOE central offices on an ongoing basis. So there are a lot of new things that you will see roll out of this division over the coming months and the years of this administration. But again, I want to thank you for putting together a thoughtful agenda tonight, for inviting me to the conversation. And I want to allow Dr. Melendez an opportunity to answer the questions that you posed. She and I work very closely together. We could reach out and touch each other. That's how closely we work together. It's not on a different floor. It's not in the office next door. It is about 3 inches of space separating us. So if you think that we are not in dialogue, or if you think that you need to, escalating means, Christina, this is what Farah said, okay? Like I don't even have to raise my voice to hear her. So do know that there's no separation between our work, the vision, and how we work together. And I want to be very clear in sharing that, because it has been our experience that we are getting emails at the same time, and we're talking about them, and parents want to escalate them, but we are already working in partnership. So I want to share that with you about our proximity, about the vision, and about the partnership. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina to say a few words, and we can get into the Q&A.
I don't really think people really understand how close, like I can see her right now. But they can't see. We're like touching each other. But I think that's a true testament to the Chancellor's vision and Deputy Chancellor Lloyd's commitment to this work, right? That the work of FACE, the work that we are doing in this division as a whole, historically hasn't been centered and valued, and there is a problem with that, and the Chancellor knew that coming in and has really committed and doubled down on making sure that at every level of this work, we have qualified individuals that get and understand the work deeply. And so I am very excited with your words, Farah, earlier on, where you're like, it's enough. We're done. We're not doing this anymore, because that is exactly what the Chancellor wants. He believes and agrees that it is enough, that we really need to engage and empower families and partner with them, because that is how we are going to make sure that our children are successful. And when our children are successful, our communities thrive. And when our communities thrive, we all benefit, right? And so if that is the work that we are doing, for too long, schools have tried to do that by themselves. And we understand and know and believe in this administration as a whole that, that it is family expertise and educator expertise coming together to really make this successful for all of us, especially our communities at large. So I am excited to be here. I had a chance to look at your questions, but I'm just very thrilled to hear them from you and to hear how you want to move forward. So thank you for having me, and I pass it back to Farah.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll pass it to Vice President of Communications, Jennifer Goddard. Yes, I just had a senior moment.
Hello. Thank you, Farah. It's all good. Good evening, Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, and also to the Executive Director to join us, Christine Melendez. So thankful and grateful for your time. I know you're busy. So the first question we had was, can you please explain the thought process behind changing the name from Family and Community Engagement, to Family and Community Engagement from Empowerment? What is the thinking behind that?
So I think two things. One, there are two things at play here. We want to be in dialogue with parents. We are not looking to disempower parents. It is not minimizing parent empowerment or educating parents. In fact, we will restore that name over time and in our materials in a very creative way. But it is not an attempt to minimize. It really is an attempt to be in conversation with parents. Christina, did you want to add?
And I think I just want to say that that there are different definitions for those terms, and we use them very loosely as a society, but they really can be interpreted in different ways. And so depending on what community you are and how you define those very loaded terms, there are some communities that are ready to engage, that have felt part of a conversation and are ready to just participate. And then there are communities that have been left behind, that have not been heard, that have been historically silenced, right? Different populations, subgroups, all the things. And so they need to be empowered, depending on how you define those terms, right? So those terms, again, I think to Deputy Chancellor Lloyd's point, they're coming back. You will see them soon, but I think it's more important that we're very clear about what those terms mean for us, and not just us here at the Department of Education, but us, the collective us, right? What do those terms mean for us? And how do we give them meaning and make space to ensure that what we are doing on a regular basis, particularly from FACE, really lives up to those definitions that we've collectively come to.
Thank you. And so just so I'm clear, as a follow-up, the terms sound like for you, empowerment means first educating parents as to what's possible, and then engagement is a continued dialogue, or can you please define?
I think that's what I'm trying to say, that they're very loaded terms that we can loosely describe to mean, we can use the same what you just said to mean the opposite word, right? Like, so I think it's really important to use our time as we get to know each other and we transition into this new administration to really define what those terms mean for us collectively. And then to create a work stream that actually represents those definitions and those missions.
I guess, Jennifer, I'd also like to add that this is something we've been talking about and we've heard since, I guess, since the org chart was published. I'd love to hear from you about what it means to parents and why that change was felt so to
I think it was a jarring. I think we had to take it as a kind of a shift in policy to go from empowerment to engagement, because for us at New York City staff, it sounded like a downgrade in terms of what the DOE was looking to do with parents, with families. So that's why we're curious, like, what's the thinking behind this? What does it mean? So if you're saying that right now we're just in a thinking phase and we're starting off with engagement and eventually we will figure out how to get back into empowerment, right? Or some new form of work stream, who knows, right? I think that's why we're very curious about it, because it was jarring. I mean, we pay attention to these things because it's how we interface, with the DOE. So if all of a sudden it has a different name, we're like, wait, what?
I appreciate you sharing that.
Okay, and now I'll pass it on to Amy, Vice President for Special Education and District 75 Policy.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, DC, Lloyd, and Melendez, Executive Director, and your team for being here this evening and being with us. Can you share the vision for school governance model that would comprise parents and student youth voices as partners, so that parents might be more amenable to mayor accountability, or referring to as parents can refer to mayor control?
That's a big question, Amy. And we want to work with all of our parent leaders, and we want to ensure, and we met about this today, that all parents understand their opportunities for leadership, and that their ability to represent their communities, to affect educational policy. We also understand that there are challenges in those existing structures, which we didn't create, which we didn't advocate for, but they are there. And again, I would, and I want to leave some time for Christina to respond to this as well. I'm very curious about what it is about those structures that are not working for parents. And I'm curious about hearing that from you. We've heard it from other parents firsthand, that some parents don't feel represented. They don't feel represented by their parent leader. They don't feel represented by the members. And we've also heard some parents actually say, they want to continue to be in dialogue with other parent leaders and members. So navigating this space and understanding, I think, from a broad section of all of our families is very important to us as we look to renew mayoral control. Christina, did you want to add to that?
I mean, I have stuff to say, but I feel like that's such an interesting question to pose to you all as well, just because you're in a very unique space where you hear from communities and folks, and you have this different perspective that we don't always get. I think that when we think about school governance, I think it's really important that we really reestablish the localized supports, right? That we really need to work to really empower FLCs and FSCs to be able to support some of our structures that exist in our leadership for parents, so that they can really do the work locally, right? I think that when there has been this weird sort of disconnect when a lot of the work that CECs are doing are being mitigated by FACE all the way at central, and not that we don't want to do it, but if we were able to strengthen and support that local CEC and superintendent relationship, it'll really make a difference at the local level. And so we're really thinking holistically about how we do that in a better way, so that CECs, who are in fact the balance to mayoral control, really are active participants and policy recommenders at the local level that are working in very close partnership with their superintendents. And that's why our current Deputy Chancellor Blackburn, who's leading the work in rehiring superintendents, is really centering the CECs in the conversations, right? That education is local, that we can speak all day about what we think generally from all the way here at 52 Chambers, but District 8, as a Bronx girl and as a Bronx educator, District 8 is very different from 9, which is very different from 12, which is very different from 11. And they're all just Bronx districts. And we don't even have to say that it's different from 7, right? And so we need to really do what we can to reimagine how to strengthen that relationship in really positive ways, so that they can work together to do the localized work at schools that happens, right? That there are many of our schools that don't have active PAs and PTAs. And we need CECs to be supportive of that structure. We need superintendents to be supportive of those things. And we need to do the work from here to really help them understand how to do that and why that is important, to really help our school leaders, which is, I think, one of your questions later. But how do we help and support our school leaders, our superintendents, our principals, to understand exactly what that partnership looks like and how important it is, and how do we create structures to ensure that that happens, right? So those are some of the things that we're thinking about when we think about your question, Amy, around, what's the vision? We're on the ground talking to folks all the time, but I think it's just at the core of it, we need to strengthen that relationship.
Can I just add to follow up on our student leaders, because a lot of times they're one of the members that are not recognized and positioned at either a school leadership team or on a CC level. And I do feel that they're just as important as the families that are voicing the educational advisory toward policy and the curriculum is being made. Students need to be a part. If there is a member seat for them, they should just be as supported by this particular division. So what would your views would be towards for the youth?
As you can imagine, Amy, first of all, I want to say that even in the conversations that I've heard, you will hear parents have a very different opinion about things than their children. It is incredible in some of the things that have just happened since I started working here, where kids are like, we really don't want those kinds of schools, and families are like, we want more of them. So it's just so interesting how that's real, that kids are experiencing school in a daily basis and are the ones that are in these spaces, and their voices aren't always included, even though there are spaces and structures that expect for them to be filled by them. Again, we go back to this space of like, we're not doing the work to ensure that that seat is not vacant at all levels. So I'm very clear that there's a lot of vacancies for high school students. And it has a lot to do with like, how do we change the culture of the council so that they're very clear so that the councils are clear that this is an essential part of the work and that their voice is equal, or just as important as theirs, right? That SLTs really listen to the students on their SLT so that they can actually have feedback, right? So I think that that's important. I think that the tricky part with FACE is just that while we can ensure that people understand the responsibility of the seat and that we can encourage folks to fill the vacancy, there's a tricky licensing, safety, security thing around children and us, right? And so we are very clear to keep children and how they're being recruited by the folks at the school level that really know and understand them and all those things, because we want to keep children safe. So that's sort of the tricky space about how we can direct that at the recruitment level. But as we encourage the vacancies to be filled, we are very clear and cognizant that those spaces are important. And there's vacancies across, like I think CCHS has a vacancy. I mean, you guys know better than me, right? Like we're not listening to our audiences and not speaking from their experience, or at least not including their experiences.
So, and Latoya, please hold up for a minute, since we're already on the topic of SLTs and PAs and PTAs, right? I guess I would like to go back to Jennifer for a minute, because she has a spectacular, I think, example of PAs or of schools not responding to the concerns of parents, even at the PA level. Jennifer, I'll let you take that one.
Hi, thanks. My question is basically what your vision is for strengthening parent leadership at schools in terms of the PTAs, the SLTs that Farah just mentioned, and to truly do the work that is defined by these structures and not just checking off boxes, because I feel like I have a recent example of lip service that's been paid to a concern that I brought before my school and was escalated to this district superintendent. And basically in question about HVAC, I wanted to provide for my son's classroom in order for him to return back to school, true HEPA filter for his classroom, and was told that we're not accepting donations from parents at this time. So I'm concerned that as a parent, I feel kind of like, well, I guess now what? Just deal with it. I mean, to bring it to the PTA, to bring it to the SLT, do I keep going? There's a structural, there's a gap between when a parent brings a concern to you and it doesn't go anywhere. So it's like, now what? What do we do to make sure that parents have avenues beyond? I guess what you said earlier makes a lot of sense. That there are challenges within the existing structures, and you wanted to hear where the challenges are. And I feel like, there are many.
Yeah, so at the heart of that is something as simple as if a parent has a health concern or a concern of any type, how is it that the decision is made strictly by the principal, as opposed to, well, these parents are concerned, and what is the opinion of the PA, and then how should we move forward in terms of the PA being a real partner, right, to the governance of the school? Because that seems to me, and Jennifer is not the only person reporting issues like that, that should be a no-brainer if a parent, brings a topic like that, to the school, and then the PA and the SLT is brought in on that, okay, so this is what's happening, this is what the parents want to do, these are the reasons, the health reasons for it, and why is that rejected and not taken into the consideration? And why is a PA or a parent not a full partner, even at that level?
Yeah. Kenita, did you want to say something?
No, I think yes, I think it's a valid concern, and it's certainly something that we can bring back and have conversations about how we remedy that, going forward, and how we ensure that as we make policy and decisions, that it is equitable across all of our schools and across all of the PAs. But certainly, a response and answers are always deserved. But that's a very interesting scenario. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can speak directly to that scenario. I'm sure there are reasons. I don't know them, but I think that the bigger point here is how are we communicating? How are our family-facing staff at our schools, whether it's the parent coordinator, the principal, the assistant principals, the superintendent, how are they creating opportunities to really listen to families and receive not just their concerns, but their celebrations? Listen, right? Listen, be true partners in the suggestions, be true partner in the possible solutions that are being presented by families. And I think I'm just going to have to go into where FACE is going. So FACE is really centered around the governance structures. If you know what FACE does, for the most part, is literally not just because it's a big job and it's a very important job, but we are really committed to supporting CECs. We are really committed to supporting SLTs, PAs, PTAs, and we are really committed to different ways where we can support our schools and their school community to increase or encourage the pipeline, right? The parent empowerment pipeline, so that at some point we raise enough awareness that other parents want to participate in these governance structures. So for the most part, FACE is very governance centered. But the problems that you are raising are those real life issues that happen on a regular basis, right? And it's like, well, it's fantastic to have families or parents that want to run for PA and PTA and get the position and try to do that work. But sometimes it's not well received at the school level or at the district level. And it's because some of our folks just don't have an understanding of what this engagement should look like. What does that partnership look like? How does that partnership feel? How do we create space for that? And so we plan to create some arm of our work to really speak to this homeschool partnership. In an ideal setting, it would be led by many educators who really understand how schools run, how districts run, and then how do we make that connection with folks? How do we train them? How do we encourage them? How do we support them as they embark in a new journey of like really truly engaging and empowering their families and really including them in a partnership, really doing the stuff that our chancellor has been modeling for us these past couple of months since he's gotten here, where he calls up all the CECs and says, hey, what do you think about this? And I know it gets overwhelming and I know it's like rapid fire and it's been happening constantly. But he's so committed to hearing you that even if it's overwhelming and hard sometimes, and maybe you can't make it, he's still setting this big precedent that like families are part of the conversation at the onset, right? And so we want to continue that and really support at the ground level families, our school leaders and our family facing folks to be able to do that too. So that's part of the work that FACE will also be engaging in. Another part of the work that we do and we want to solidify is our community partnerships. There are a lot of things going on in our communities. There are a lot of CBOs that are really committed to helping and supporting our communities. There are organizations or advocacy groups like yours that are really connected on the ground and really get their communities and their constituencies way better and at a different different level than we will ever. And so how do we have conversations on a consistent level with folks like you and other groups, so that we can better understand this communities, right? So how do we continue these school partnerships, these community partnerships, these advocacy partnerships, and really understand and engage with them so that we know what's happening, so that sometimes families are able to tell you before they tell us for many reasons. And so we need to hear what we need to hear, and we need to know what's going on. And this is another way to find out. But what community partnerships is going to really help us do is get to the other parents and families that are not always participating in schools for a variety of reasons. Many of them social obstacles that are placed on them, whether they have to go to work a certain time, whether they can't participate because of language access, because they don't feel like they are included or part of this community because of their immigration status. There's so many things that go on that keep families away from schools, and it is not that they don't want to.
Right. So
It's
thank you for
because they
that.
can't, right? And so
Right.
we're going to leverage the CBOs to really support us in identifying those families, identifying those obstacles, and then helping us break them down.
So to that point, Dr. Melendez, because I think this goes back to, I guess, Latoya's question. And Latoya, if you can ask your question, because I think while we are hearing that the systems may be built, but then how do you get principals, right, and parent coordinators to actually do that? Like, as a mom, right, there are consequences for the things that my children don't do. So I think to Latoya's question, we want to hear a little bit about you in terms of how you plan to strengthen. Well, I'll let Latoya ask the question, and then I'll hear your answer.
Yes.
In terms of building it from the ground, because principals would have to do some of that work, right? Go ahead, Latoya, please.
Good evening, DC Lloyd and Dr. Melendez. What is your vision for building and strengthening relationships between parents and school administration to ensure that parents are an integral part of their children's education? Example, language access, cultural barriers, parent rights and responsibilities, and etc.
Thank you for the question, Latoya. So there are multiple avenues that we are pursuing. So the first is that we fully intend to continue to engage in the existing structures. As you've seen, our participation across all of those groups and town halls and organizing additional meetings like this one and others. The second is that we are also looking at a variety of ways to use technology and assistive technology. Well, let me be careful about how I use that wording, but use technology with and also support families in using technology on how to survey parents citywide on a more regular basis, not just about our school quality, but really to get their input on a range of things, everything from our gifted and talented to this, forthcoming dyslexia screens, as well as school food. We recognize, and I recognize, that we are not using all of the tools in the toolkit to capture parent voice, particularly and especially those parents, those unelected parents who have things to say or would easily fill out or complete a pulse survey or other ways to be in contact with us. We want to use all of the tools in the toolkit to capture parent voice, to capture their feelings, their opinions about things, but also use that data to inform decision making in addition to town halls, in addition to dialogue. The final piece about translations, this goes back to my opening remarks about identifying and increasing the resources needed in order to effectively communicate with our parents. And I recognize, we prioritize, and I'm advocating for our T&I team to continue to increase capacity in order to be able to provide translation services to continue to provide translation services in a timely fashion across all of our platforms, and to explore ways that we can provide the word just escapes me, but to provide that translation of those materials in personal documents, in IEPs, and in all of the documents that we know are critical to families making decisions about their child's education.
Okay, thank you for that. That sounds good, sounds progressive. So I guess, embedded in that question is like, how do you then give incentives, right, to school officials to sort of not just pay lip service, but actually engage and then move in the direction that parents may need them to move in?
Christina, you want to take that one? I feel like I'm talking a lot.
I think it's really, really essential to this work that there is a strong connection between parent leadership structures and superintendents at the local level. There has to be, right? That CECs and superintendents and president's councils have to work together to create a vision for their district. And I think there's a lot of conversations happening here around, once that person is hired, what are some of the most important pieces of their job that are going to be highlighted? And for sure, centering families is going to be essential, and centering their voice is going to be essential. The chancellor is already modeling that, and that is the expectation that is going to be pushed down to the districts, right? So just like he's doing it at the city level, he's also expecting for superintendents to do the same things, to engage with families, to really value and figure out ways to include them before they are launching or thinking or doing, right? And so those are some of the things that are already being demonstrated that are the expectations that are going to be set at the district level. And so it's inevitably going to be a different way of doing business because the chancellor's doing it. He's walking in his talk, right? He's not just paying lip service, and we all are in support of that. And DC Dr. Blackburn is also very clear about the importance of families. And so when he's hiring, when CECs are part of the conversations, when CECs are evaluating their superintendents, all those things are going to be very different and valued and seen in a different way than as historically they may have been.
Okay, so I'll let Jennifer ask a question in a minute, but then if I understand correctly, it's more like the chancellor will model and the superintendents will follow suit. But then I'm wondering in terms of just the institutions themselves, right? And I guess, Jennifer, I'll let you ask the question as opposed to me asking it. But I'm interested in how we, go ahead, Jennifer, because I don't want to ask your questions.
I'm sorry, are we referring to question G? Or are we going?
Well, I think we are on, because Dr. Melendez spoke about CTs, right? But then I think part of the problem that we have is that we don't feel that CCs have any real teeth, right?
Correct.
In terms of, yeah. So do you want to take it from there, Jennifer? Do you just want me to continue?
Well, my next question was about how parents would gain access to the constituents, but that's not what you're asking here. Okay. So Why don't you go ahead and ask it?
But that does fall under strengthening CCs, right?
Yeah.
Because CCs, while they, they are quote unquote, right, advisors to the superintendent, advisors to the chancellor, but their resolutions are not binding. Nobody actually pays any attention to them, as far as we know. Superintendents, principals can dismiss the observations and assessments of CCs. So the next question, I guess, which would be logical after, hearing what you said, is how is it that you are planning to strengthen CECs and by extension PAs, by extension SLTs and DLTs and all of that in a way that is real and that is not just, that doesn't just depend on the good hearts of this superintendent or this principal or the greatness of Chancellor Banks, and that will actually outlive Chancellor Banks' tenure as the Chancellor of New York City Public Schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. Many pieces. I'm going to start with, we are in the process of hiring new superintendents. It's a real process. You're going to see that it is a real process. You are going to participate in such process in a real way, give real feedback. CECs are at the center of that, but not by themselves. They will be in partnership with President's Councils, with DPAC, which is another very forgotten source, right? And so how it is together that that person will be selected and hired. Does the chancellor have the final say, and does their designee, his designee, which in this case is DC Blackburn? Yes. But there is a real commitment to listening to your thoughts based on your community's needs. So I think that that's the first part. The first part is that there's not going to be a superintendent in this city that wasn't hired with the active participation of CECs, President's Councils, DPAC, and all leadership groups, right? So, and that's unique because you've been here long enough to know that sometimes you'll show up with one candidate, sometimes you'll show up with 3 candidates, but 2 of them can't possibly be the ones, right? And so that's no longer going to be the way business is done. We've heard you loud and clear. We hear what you're saying. And Dr. Blackburn is really putting together a process that we're going to talk about more soon, but that really is incorporating your voice and your participation. Right, so you're going to have a partner in the superintendent in a real partnership, not a superficial partnership, not a forced partnership, but there's a real partnership. There's also an expectation for the superintendent to actually do a whole lot of things, but the part that I care about the most is, selfishly, is incorporate parent voice in their work in a very real way, and that is going to be inspected, supervised, supported in all the ways that we know how. So FACE is going to play a role in the superintendent's professional development. What does engagement and empowerment look like for families? How are you including them beyond the leadership structures? How are you supporting CECs when there are empty seats or vacancies? How are you supporting PAs and PTAs? How are you ensuring that every principal in your district has a functioning PA? How are you ensuring that it's not a default PA election, right? But that you have a community that is so eager to participate beyond the elementary school, which is also a thing, right? We love our babies from K to 5 and we want to be in the schools, and then 6th grade, we're like, oh, oh, he's big. So we want to keep them. We want to keep parents involved. So how are we doing that? And that's a different kind of support that FACE has to give to those kinds of those principals in middle school, in high school, where it's hard, where parents are like, oh, I want to give them some autonomy, and they interpret that as like leaving them at school alone, right? So how do we bring them back? How do we create spaces in K to 12 experience where families are actual integral parts of the execution of those spaces in our schools? So we are very committed to authentic partnership. We're not trying to check off boxes, as Jennifer said before. We're not trying to just make sure things are happening because they should. There has already been demonstrations of real interest in participation and commitment to hearing you before things are done, to getting feedback. You're going to see in the C37 process that your feedback was heard loud and clear, and you're going to hopefully really get invested and get your community invested in the hiring of your superintendents, so that then you have a real partner that you can count on. You can ask those questions in this process as well. How are you making sure our voice matters?
Thank you so much for the Dr. Melendez. And I want to bargain for a few, because we are way behind schedule in our questioning, and there are some questions that are super important, like the parent union stuff. So please don't go away, stay with us. I'll buy you lunch. That's not a bribe.
And also, can I point out that there's some really great points being made in the chat by some of our members. So if you haven't looked at the chat, there's some really great points being brought up there.
Deepak, I said it, I mentioned it. Yeah,
so Amy, oh yeah, go ahead, Dr. Melendez.
I just want to be honest and tell you that I do have a child that needs me, and I'm still at 52 Chambers Street. So
okay, it will be quick though, but because we have to get.
I just want to be honest. I just want to be honest.
Yes. Okay. So, but just a few more minutes, Amy. We gotta be quick because we don't want to lose Dr. Melendez or the Deputy Chancellor. Go ahead, Amy.
So you touched on what the relationship or partnership should, what the focus would be for FACE. What is the vision for empowering synergy that supports collaboration and information during sharing among parent leadership groups in districts and across districts and with the panel for educational policy?
Amy, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. What is your vision for empowering synergy that supports collaboration and information sharing among parent leadership groups in districts, across districts, and with the panel for educational policy? So a lot of times, parents who want to, be out there to lead for, their child or for the community, and a lot of times they just don't have that information. So, how can your division support in making sure that the information is out there so that parents can participate in ensuring that they are in the parent leadership groups?
So, Amy, I think that's a great question, and thank you for asking it. And it's one that we are navigating internally in real time, with our the new mayoral, the mayoral and the BP appointees and the parent appointees for all of the PEP members. I'm constantly thinking of ways to increase access to information for them. We have been, each month we've been debriefing after each PEP meeting, hearing from PEP members and adjusting how we are engaging them in the process as well. We met extensively in this last month, especially to really tweak what presentations have been, who was involved in the discussion, taking additional time to ensure that panel members are informed and have opportunities to go deeper when they have questions. But I think in short, to answer your question, some of it is sharing creating a synergy and system that shares information in a timely fashion across all of our stakeholders. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we don't do that now, but I have definitely identified some areas where I think that are in need of improvement, that I acknowledge are in need of improvement, and we're working very hard to create that synergy and access to information.
And would that include, because one of the complaints that we have as CEC members, right, is sometimes we want to do something with a CEC that's not in our borough. And we will have our AA write to that CEC, the AA of that CEC, and I promise you that we never get an answer. And those CECs, because they work in silos or what have you, they are not interested, right, in necessarily working with other CECs in other boroughs or even in the same borough. So, you know, how do you sort of support that information sharing, that collaboration, but really as an integral part, right, of what we do? That's not something we do by accident or when we mean, but CECs are, because, you know, if New York City is considered one district, right, for the state, it should mean that there should be enough collaborations among CECs, among PAs and SLTs all throughout the city, sort of like this pell-mell kind of thing, where they're working together, that would give the impression that we are really one city.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I love the fact that you even see it that way, because as you noted, not everyone does, right? Like not every CEC sort of sees collaboration as imperative to their work, or that my success in CEC 8 is going to, if I collaborate with CEC 9, it's just going to make the Bronx better, right? There's so much siloing, as you referenced. I think it's really important, because of CEC autonomy and the inability for us to force collaboration in any sort of real way. It's important to model that. It's true, what you're describing is also true at the superintendent level. It's also true from principal to principal, right? There's this like, this is my school and these are my kids, and this thing is great and it's working, and I'm not going to tell anyone because I don't know, right? So it's really important that we lead in a way where collaboration as opposed to competition is what's encouraged. And so from where I sit, I think it's really important to find those opportunities where there is space and willingness for folks to collaborate. So I've already gotten letters, and I want folks to collaborate on issues and like solutions, right? I have gotten letters signed by multiple CECs around the problem, which is fine. I appreciate that. I welcome that. And there's like 18 CECs that signed the letter that said, you're not doing this right. And that's great. To me, any collaboration, whether it's coming from a space of advocacy or coming from a space of positivity, is important and valuable. And so to me, I feel like there are spaces where it's already happening, where groups and CECs from different areas are coming together and saying, enough is enough. This is not good. So how do I continue to leverage those relationships and encourage those relationships and support those relationships? And so I'm just getting to know everyone. But I'm very excited to know that there are groups of people that are already willing to collaborate and come together. And how do I then figure out other ways where, you know, there's this similar issue in the Bronx that's similar to something in Brooklyn. How do we bring those folks together, right? How do we problem solve together? How do we think through things together and invite you, right? So those things are happening as we speak. Like there are meetings happening with some CECs because they've had a similar sort of rollout of a program that didn't quite work out as well. And so I'm meeting with all of those CEC presidents to say, hey, what works, what didn't work, how come? Because the result was the same for the four of you and you're in different places. So how do we continue to do that? Sometimes we don't want to do that because we think it's like, oh, but it's a negative thing. It's not always going to be roses, but it's through however I can leverage folks supporting each other, I'm going to continue to do that. And if
I
you have
mean,
ideas, I welcome them.
well, we do have
There we
an
go,
idea.
Jennifer. Do it.
We actually do have an idea on that, thinking of having some sort of collaboration,
Yeah.
collaborative spirit between parents citywide. And we'd like to know, whether or not, what is your opinion on whether or not you think parents need to form a union in order to secure a seat at the table regarding decision making, regarding their, educational policies, etc. Similar to what, UFT and pardon me, DC 37 and CSA have. What are your thoughts on that? Whether or not that's something that FACE and the DOE would support. Sorry, I know that's a bomb.
That's a big one. Even when I read it in the paper before, I was like,
Yeah.
I'll tell you exactly what I said. To be honest, I have not given this much thought. And that's full transparency. This is what I'm also going to say though. I am fundamentally hardwired, like wrote my whole dissertation on the fact that parents are the experts on their children. And I don't know if you need a union or not, but I know that as a mom of two, there is no way that I don't have a seat at the table. And so I think it is my job, it's our job here to ensure that there are a lot of seats for everyone and that we use both ears. So I don't know the answer to the question. That's your question. And you all are a powerful force, but I think the biggest superpower you have is that you are the experts on your child, and there is no shortcut to that. There's not enough educational training that I could go through to better understand your child. There is not, I have a whole doctorate. I have 2 master's degrees. I've been a bilingual teacher forever. I've done all of the things, and I am still not the expert on your child. So it is on me to make sure that I partner with you so that I can best support your child. And I believe that, and that's my commitment to this work, and that's how I enter these spaces. And so it's more important for me to figure out ways to ensure the table has enough seats available.
Thank you so much for that. I hope everybody can hear me. I had a little technical issue. So you see, so we'll go to Latoya for the next question, and we'll be quick because we know we have to get to the vision question.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Farah, she already did question J already. So what?
H.
I love this. I already love that it's not 1 through 5.
I really I just want to say that I am so happy to be as part of this conversation, but I do have to leave shortly. I put in the chat that my son just called and he's asking me what time I'm getting home. So, and I know that all of you understand that.
Yes, 2 more questions. So, Latoya's question and then your vision question.
Farah, I told you weren't shy. She's like, yes, Farah, and 2 more questions. Yep.
Yeah.
Farah, can we do 1 more question? Is there?
Oh,
how
but
about
she
you
has
ask
to answer
both questions? Ask both questions, and then we'll answer. How about that?
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Latoya, take it away.
What is your vision for attracting, training, and retaining parents so that they are more effective as parent leaders, serving in impactful positions as partners with principals, superintendents, the chancellor, and the PEP?
I'm going to take a stab, and then and Christina's going to tell you.
Wait, I'm sorry, Deputy Chancellor. So because the other question.
That was 1 question.
Yes,
they're going to ask both questions.
Yes, your legacy and what you think your impact will be after your tenure.
So right, I'm going to take the first one. I'm sorry, the second one first. After my tenure, I think that parents will have seen some real innovation in how the New York City Department of education engages parents. Going back to technology, living within our parent leadership structures, being in dialogue, and being responsive. Those will be all of the things that will happen as part of my legacy. As part of recruiting parents, I want to say something probably unusual. Parents are as involved as they want to be. I think all parents. I think it is our role to educate and inform parents about the opportunities to be involved in leadership in their school community, and in many ways that affect and inform their decision making for their individual student. But I also know that some parents need to rely on parent leaders to support them in that effort. Not every parent has an opportunity, has the time, the opportunity, the resources to advocate for themselves. And I want to underscore here that they are relying on parent leaders to help shape that information, to share the information that they have, to help raise awareness about decision points that they can make and where they can be involved. But not every parent is committed. I think every parent loves and wants the best for their student. Not every parent has the time and the resources and the space to advocate. And you are the parent leaders, and they are certainly relying on you. And it is our responsibility to share the information and to create the access in order for them to do that. But we are never going to see 100% of parents participate and dedicate the time, effort, energy, and passion that our parents leaders do so dedicate so much and so much of their time.
Thank you for that. And did you want to add something, Dr. Melendez, before I push back a little bit?
Before you push back?
Little bit, because you know what I want to say, Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, is that I think we have to look for multiple ways like parents can engage and be involved at different levels. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's what we are doing right now, but there's room for parents to be more involved than they are right now. And then, yes, I agree with you, we'll never be 100%, but I do think a lot of parents are simply discouraged, right? And they don't know how to navigate and they don't know what is expected of them. And may we say, and I think, we've discussed this today, yesterday, I mean, we've been discussing this all along. It's like, I'm not saying it's purposeful, but the result of it is that there is the discouragement of parents to actually get involved, right? I remember when I first got on the CEC, for example, when literally we had a superintendent that told us she didn't care for parent voice. And she said parents were too rude. She didn't care for them. So if you're a parent with difficulty with the language or culture, or you have maybe a legal problem or certain things, because with the intersection of so many government agencies, right, in the schools, right, there are a lot of parents who are simply afraid of getting involved because of retaliation. Mm. So I think we have to look at those things too. And this is not to say you're wrong, but I don't think you're 100% right in terms of how to invite more parents in and how to, engage them. Like, for example, we know with Zoom, for example, right? A lot of parents who ordinarily wouldn't be involved, but now they are more because, well, they can cook while attending a meeting at the same time. So I think the burden is on us to sort of find creative ways of getting parents more involved, because what we have discovered is the reasons why they are not so involved, it's not because they don't care or don't have the time. Not that you said that, but we hear that a lot, like in our districts and all over the city. Parents just don't care. They care. Yeah. Right?
I think right. And
no, you didn't say that. I know. No, you didn't say that. I know.
And I also want to say that I do believe that all parents care, but it goes back to what I said originally about creating multiple ways and using all of the tools in the toolkit, just like you mentioned, Zoom, so that parents can participate in the ways that they are able to, the ways that they have time to, and the ways that we can, and the ways that more ways than we can provide. I do
Yeah.
take very seriously what I've heard from you and from others about parents being discouraged from participating in by other, leaders, other leaders of New York City public schools. And that goes back to Christina's point about the chancellor modeling this priority around parent engagement, modeling training, supporting, and making it part of continuing to be able to see that in his vision throughout his entire tenure. That is what is critically important. So I do believe parents care, but I agree with you, Farah, that they need as many options to participate. We need to meet them in as many places as we can in order to engage with them about issues that they care about.
Yeah. And I think that also what Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, what I heard her say earlier as well was we need to provide multiple ways, multiple entry points, but we also need to ensure that our parent leaders have everything they need to get to all the parents, right? And so I think that that's also the piece that that we need support and help with. Like we have some structures to help us. And so how do all of us together create this army to help and support everyone in either getting a seat at the table or sharing their voice and concerns with someone who can get it to the table.
Mhm.
I agree. And this was a wonderful conversation because I have to keep my promise, otherwise you guys won't come back. And so
It's about the children, Farah.
Yes. So honestly, thank you so much for the time, for trusting us. Because, and I have to put it out there, your office did not put any pressure on us, did not ask for questions. We sent them at the last minute as a courtesy. You did not try to control the conversation. You were totally 100% receptive and just came on board. And I think for us, that was a first in terms of experience, because whenever we ask anyone to come on our platform, it's always, it has to be very controlled. And you guys didn't do that at all. So I want to say, namaste. Thank you for that, because yes.
Farah, you put my picture on the flyer, so I couldn't exactly pull out.
It's a nice touch there, Farah. Nice touch.
And well, that was a beautiful picture. When I saw it, I said, that's the one. So
that's the one.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you for really coming here authentically and and did not try to control the conversation at all, and for answering our questions honestly and asking our help where you want our help, and not just admitting that you don't have all the answers and that we are constructing this. And I really, really, truly appreciate it. And so I don't know what my closing statement is, but I'm getting to it now. It's only 30 seconds. I just want to make sure I thank everyone. So on behalf of the NYC Coalition for Educating Families Together, I thank you, Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, Executive Director Melendez, Senior Director Mojica, Chief of Staff, God, I hope I don't mispronounce this, but Jedlinik, Executive Assistant Jackson, the team at NYC, especially Chaplain Mitchell, Sandra, we wish you well. All of our attendees and supporters, people who give us ideas behind the scenes, who work with us, because I want it to be clear, not everyone at the DOE does not support parents, because we do have some wonderful teachers, principals, superintendents, executive superintendents, parent coordinators, lots of great people who help us and help us navigate. So we hope this is the beginning of a real dialogue and a real partnership with parents and the New York City Public Schools that is based in mutual respect and understanding. And we hope that we are partners in the designing of this new parent partnership infrastructure, because it is the only way parents will wholeheartedly support mayoral accountability or mayoral control if it comes to that, because we are not opposed to the mayor trying to, do what he can for schools, but parents, we want to be at the table fully. And for the ones of us who are not at the table fully because we don't know enough, we want to be supported in learning enough so that we can be true advocates. So with that, I want to say good night to all of us, and Deputy Chancellor Lloyd, go take care of your baby, and Dr. Melendez, go take care of your baby, and all parents, go take care of your babies, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good
You
night.
too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.